Hello, thank you everyone for your patience. So we'll beginning. First, we're going to begin with Kim Stewart. She is going to give her opening statement, and she is also going to answer the first question as a result of the coin toss that we did at the beginning. And so in the first hour, we're each going to ask a question. We're waiting on the Democratic Party's questions to be printed. So first, the Southern New Mexican Progressives and the Republican Party are going to alternate, and then the Democratic Party representative will be with us shortly. Thank you. So, Kim Stewart. So the opening statements are a minute and a half, max. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon. Some say I don't even need this, but we'll go with it. I am Kim Stewart. I'm running for Sheriff of Dona County, and I thank you for coming today and showing your interest. It's terrific going into a midterm election season with this much energy. So thank you very much. I am a retired California law enforcement officer. And during that time, I came to realize that community policing, which by the way has been around since the 70s, a long time, was really a pathway forward for law enforcement overall. I was lucky enough in my experience to work for supervisors while I was in patrol for 10 years who often gave me a little bit of leeway about doing line level investigations. And in doing that, I realized that taking that bicycle theft report might lead you to some very interesting places if you took the time to truly listen to the community. At that time, Neighborhood Watch had taken off. There were people in schools, deputies and police that were starting to impact the school curriculums. And I realized then that in order to really make that type of philosophy work, we had to do a complete transformation. And I'll be honest with you, very few departments in the country do it. 95% of departments pick and choose parts of it. They don't do the whole thing. So that's where I am. That's my platform. It's been that way since I started this race, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Good day. My name is Todd Garrison, and I just want to thank everyone for being here today also. I am the Republican candidate for Sheriff of Dona County. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised here in Dona County. I entered into law enforcement when I turned 21 in the academy, and I worked for 16 years for the city PD, at which time I left due to some things going on internally that I just didn't agree with, and I left, and I at that time was hired by DPS, working with Motor Trans. I worked there for 6 years in 5 counties, Dona County being one of those, supervising 25 other officers, and then became the appointed sheriff in 2005 when Sheriff Juan Hernandez got sick. I was, after that, finishing his term, was elected twice by the people of Dona County and retired due to term limits in 2014. You have to sit out for a term and then you can run again if you so choose. I have received, I just knew whenever I left I wasn't finished. I'm still young and ready to continue, and decided to run for sheriff this time again, and to continue on working with the people and law enforcement in Dona County. I'm passionate about the office of sheriff. I believe that having a law enforcement office that is voted on by who runs that office is very important, because being elected by the people of the county and being responsible to the people of the county hold you in a different position. And I'm looking forward to this race and dealing with Ms. Stewart day to day. It seems like we run into each other all the time. And I just thank you all for your time here today, and look forward to this event and the questions coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as for the representatives, my name is Antoinette Reyes, representing the Southern New Mexico Progressives. We have Tom Olson representing the Democratic Party of Dona County, and Bill Mueñez. sorry. Roth and Gass, sorry. Representing the Republican Party of Dona County. Thank you. So to begin the questions, beginning with Kim Stewart, and for all of the questions you have up to 2 minutes. What challenges do you see in updating the way the Sheriff Office tracks inventory, specifically weapons and vehicles, and how can they better track complete crime statistics?
Currently, the Sheriff's Department only keeps statistics on the 9 major crime categories they submit to the FBI. There are a whole subset of crime analysis and crime reporting that should be kept. It's unclear, because neither one of us are in there, to know why some of that is not being done. But crime analytics, crime analysis is crucial going forward. To tie into various dispatch issues, records management, that has to be rectified. Okay, that's primary. Inventory management is part of an overall audit, which the county has never done, in my recollection of the Sheriff's Department, since 2008, when I first became acquainted. No overarching audit. So while it's great to track inventory of specific things like cars and what money's bought, what item, you also have to have an eye towards where are we now financially, the total picture. And it's usually best practices when elected officials go out and new ones come in, that is done by agencies so that we know what we're signing on and accepting.
What challenges do you see in updating the way the Sheriff Office tracks inventory, such as weapons and vehicles, and complete crime statistics?
As to the crime statistics, I think it's very important to keep track of those. I know that we meet the FBI regulations by following certain crimes, and I know that when I was sheriff before, I had actually hired a couple of people to actually keep track of the local stuff that was going on so that we better knew what was happening in the different areas throughout the county. In Dona County, we have over 30 communities from one end to the other, and different things are occurring at different times, so it's important to know those things and to keep track of stuff like that so that we can address the issues. And also with our equipment, it's very important. I mean, when we spend taxpayer money to purchase equipment and resources, we're held accountable for those things. And, you know, doing the internal audits within the Sheriff's Office that we do, when I was sheriff before, I hired a person to specifically do that. Her job was to, as we received equipment in, to mark that equipment with the county numbers, and then to mark it with a number for the Sheriff's Office, and then to randomly do inspections, and then every June, I think by June 31st, a report was due to the county that also maintained those things. I know that when I was there, I went through a number of audits that the county had gone through, and the Sheriff's Office was included in that. I think it's the Sheriff's responsibility to keep up with the budget, to make sure we have the resources and equipment needed, and very important to maintain and keep track of those things. Okay, let's go back to process. All right, do I have to push the button for me?
No, I turned it off.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Don't mind my back. Oh, don't mind my back. Bill Rothen, yes. A little background. I had the honor and privilege of being with the Sheriff's Department for almost 15 years, and quite a bit of that was under Todd Garrison, and I'm still here. Anyway, I have some questions. They really apply to both of you. Excuse me. I'm looking at the status of both candidates being able to take the position of sheriff. Is there anything going on right now that would supersede, rescind your potential of being sheriff, either one of you? Meaning lawsuits, whatever might be in the background, I don't know. I hope that was clear. Is there anything that might keep you from becoming sheriff? Let's say you were elected.
No, if elected sheriff, I could begin working day one.
Okay. Ms. Stewart?
No, my lawsuit was settled in July 2015.
I don't believe what I read in the papers, but if you don't mind, there seems to be something outstanding that has not been cleared up, and maybe you can clear it up for all of us. That you were not to take any kind of a position with the county.
There is part of the financial settlement that said I would not seek re-employment. An elected official works for the people of the community. I would be voted in as our commissioners. Commissioner Gonzalez is not an employee of the county. So there is one sentence that says you shall not seek re-employment. I'm not. I'm seeking to be the elected sheriff by the people.
Okay, so the next question. How do you plan on improving morale in the sheriff's office? Beginning with
Morale in the sheriff's department is often not looked upon as the venue of the sheriff or the chief. They will often tell you, morale is not my issue. I totally disagree, and if we go into a paradigm or a model of community policing, we're going to invert the triangle. So right now, law enforcement in this county at the sheriff's department is done if you want to see a model, it looks like this. Hold on. Okay? Right now it's this. We're going to invert that so that we begin to redirect financial resources of the department to those who deliver your service. Who are those people? They are sheriff's deputies, civilian personnel. We are going to redirect and begin to work on those people's training, and if we invest in them, there is going to be a return on that investment because people then begin to realize that we believe in them, we want to increase their professionalism, and they will want to move forward with us. Retention is a tremendous problem in all departments, and you really got to have an eye towards that, especially when you direct funds to training.
How do you plan on improving morale in the sheriff's office?
Having been involved in law enforcement in Dona County for over 30 years, I can tell you that morale is one of those things that's constantly changing. Sometimes it's due to financial reasons, sometimes it's due to internal reasons, sometimes it's due to unfairness within the office or within the department. And I think that one of the things that I will do is to focus on the tax base in Dona County is smaller than what's in the city. But it's important for Dona County to remain in the race and not to fall so far behind that we lose our officers due to poor morale over financial reasons to the city or to other higher paying departments. We're going to work hard to seek officers that live in this county and want to change this community, and work hard to keep our pay at a competitive rate. And then also I believe that the officers that we hire and train in New Mexico are a credit to our communities. They have a desire to serve the public most of the time, and I want to make sure that that remains at the top of the list. And I want to make sure that they're trained proficiently to make sure that gets done. And also, as the sheriff leading the office in Dona County, I want to make sure that the officers know the direction that we'll be headed and which way we'll be going, so they know where they're headed.
Okay, I have a question for both candidates, and it will be multifaceted just by the nature of the question and the time that we have available. The background for both of you in law enforcement, managerial experience specifically, and more of a resume, a specific resume and background, specifically managerial experiences. And part of that is that the chief officer, the sheriff, is certified in New Mexico as a law enforcement officer. I'm just asking if both of you have that.
I am certifiable with a cert by waiver. After 3 years, you lose your certification, but due to the fact I retired in New Mexico under those requirements, I can be recertified with a 2-week or 3-week cert by waiver course. In my managerial skills throughout law enforcement, when I was with the city PD, I never worked as a supervisor, but I did run the academy for about 7 years, at which time I oversaw the hiring, the disciplinary issues of the cadets that came through during that time, involved in the hiring process, the acquired resources and different things like that, and any disciplinary issues that came up for those officers. Upon leaving there, I was a sergeant with DPS, over 5 counties, in charge of 25 officers at that time. And then,
Excuse me.
yes.
Maybe somebody in the public doesn't know what DPS is.
I'm sorry, Department of Public Safety and State Police, and I was under the Border Transportation Division. That's the officers that deal with the semi or commercial motor vehicles. Then once becoming sheriff, I oversaw the sheriff's office. At that time, I believe we had roughly 300, in the neighborhood of 300, that would be deputies, civilian staff, and volunteer staff.
Would you repeat the question for me? I lost track.
Sure. Okay. All right, what I asked was specific positions that were held in law enforcement, managerial specifically. You mentioned 10 years on patrol. I think you said that, in California. Am I right in 10 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm referring mainly to managerial, such as police chief, sheriff.
I'm a 20-year retiree.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
And the other,
I went 10 years in patrol. That's the
Okay,
distinction.
you asked me what it was, and the other part of that was certified in New Mexico as a law enforcement officer.
No, I am not certified. I would be an administrative sheriff. This is what we have currently. Sheriff B. Hill is not a certified law enforcement officer. It is an administrative position to be the sheriff in this state. My undersheriff is actively working. He is a 22 veteran of the Las Cruces Police. He will run the operation, and he's certified fully. In my career, I retired at the pay grade of a lieutenant. It's a little bit different in California than it is here. I retired out of the district attorney's office where I was an investigator. And at that pay grade, I handled task force. I managed a task force because, of course, we were the final say for a lot of county agencies. That said, I was a field supervisor in my tenure, and here that would be a sergeant. So it's slightly different. It doesn't carry over completely. I also owned my own corporation for 3 years. I had employees. I learned how to run business, and I have a degree, undergraduate degree in history. I understand how to research and locate information and synthesize it and filter it to the appropriate areas.
Okay, and the next question is regarding work ethic. The New Mexico statute only requires sheriffs work a minimum of 8 hours a month. How much do you plan to work a week, and how much time do you plan to spend in the sheriff's office?
I think that first quarter, probably every waking minute. I'm not only exaggerating by a little bit. I'm a person who goes to work every day. I have a history of being present, being motivated, being proactive. Whatever the law says in terms of the number of hours a month, I'm going to disregard that. I don't believe in 2018 going forward. Frankly, I haven't believed that in the last 10 years that we have needed a person just to be present of an operation like that for a minimum of 8 hours a month. I have no other jobs. I don't have any sustaining hobbies that would take me away from the experience there of being the sheriff. The other thing about that is Mr. Quesada and I have a very specific mission going forward, and we want to see that realized in 4 years. And that will not be something I can do alone or he can do alone.
So So New Mexico statute only requires sheriffs work a minimum of 8 hours per month. How much do you plan to work per week, and how much time do you plan to spend in the sheriff's office?
That is what the statute requires is 8 hours a month. I don't know of many elected officials that work those kind of hours. Your phone is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that you were sheriff all the time. When I was sheriff before, I was involved, as the sheriff, you are involved in many different things with many different communities, attending meetings throughout the county, throughout the state, and different things like that. So to be in the office all the time is impossible, but being in the office and working is very important, and I plan on working many hours. I know from past experience it was anywhere from 50 to 70 hours a week until 8 or 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Yes. Oh, sorry, they were going to bring in questions. So if you have one else you'd like to go.
I'm perfectly capable. For both of you, what I know about law enforcement is what I read in the papers. And this morning I read again that in this case a Las Cruces officer shot a guy who apparently had mental problems. This happens over and over again. It's not just a problem in New Mexico or here, it's everywhere. And I'm well aware of what happened, how we were going to take mental health out of institutions and make it a robust community service. That never happened. It's not going to happen. So my question is, what's the role of police here in making sure that we don't shoot to death people who are mentally ill, that we are in a role of what kind of training goes on? Does anybody have any police systems around the country have any answers to this? What are we going to do?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a very, very good question. Having been involved in law enforcement in Dona County for over 30 years, I know that many times I have dealt with those very same kind of calls. I think any law enforcement officer responding to a call, it's his desire and hope that he can effectively take care of the situation and help the people that are involved. You know, that oftentimes, you know, having been an officer for those years and being criticized by what people have no idea of the actual facts that occurred during that time, it's you have to speak in generalities right now because I don't have any idea what the facts were. But knowing that in the job of law enforcement, taking one's life is something that an officer may have to do at some point in time. There's training in the mental health area that officers need to be trained in. I think that we have a few trained now, and I think that we're working as departments and offices to try to get more and more of that kind of training. I think we need to work more with our communities and with our mental health professionals to try to figure out how to deal with that specific issue because it's happening way too many times, and I totally agree with you. I know that anytime a law enforcement officer is involved in a deadly shooting like that, that's something he has to live with or she has to live with for the rest of their life, and it's not an easy point for them also. And this is something that I think would benefit the community and law enforcement greatly to pursue that training or that issue at a much deeper level than we are right now.
Currently, I believe the academy meets the minimum standard for training. I believe that needs to be greatly increased. Here's the issue with mentally ill. Probably that's who we in law enforcement have dealt with extensively. I would judge whether they are self-diagnosed or they've been diagnosed. That's a prominent person that we would meet in our daily life. NAMI is the National Association of the Mentally Ill. They do local training. They do provide CIT training, which is basically crisis intervention. I've met with them to come in to expand our program at the academy. That's vital. There are other things that are being done, but we don't have that infrastructure you mentioned. specifically the LEADS program. That's where sheriffs and police get together and they determine what crimes, low-level crimes, are often most committed by mentally ill, and it gives the line-level deputy the decision when encountering those individuals to divert them to mental treatment. It's not a, hey, you might want to go, or you're either going to go or you're going to be cited and released on this minor crime. But that puts people more in touch, directs them to mental health services. We don't have the number of providers at present to do that. So there are other things across the country. I've explored them myself. But because of our constraints here, it makes it difficult to do what you're suggesting.
One of the major concerns of many, many people here in Dona County across the nation is the situation with, and forgive me if I use a word that's going to offend somebody, I don't mean to, but illegal alien arrest. In my tenure, we came across it quite often. It was turned over. But for both of you, what is your specific position when something like that comes up? In other words, you're on a call, one of the deputies, police officers on a call, and it's fairly evident, either by language or the fact that there is no insurance or no license or no registration. I can wait. This is for both candidates, by the way. Okay, so you're in control of this.
Are you asking if they want to check from it?
I'm getting to that. Sometimes you have to build up. Okay, so what is your position as sheriff, both of you, as to how that would be handled in the future? And there's more than one way to handle it, I realize, but generally speaking, the training that goes on now and any additional training that might be brought into the department, if that question was clear, how would the deputies be trained to handle that type of thing? What do they do with someone who they think is illegal, or they get somebody they have to arrest for some other crime, and sometimes it comes up, many times it comes up. What's your position on that?
State law prevents state commissioned officers from enforcing federal regulations. We have no authority to approach people based on suspected undocumented status.
That wasn't my question, though. I said in the course of their business, if they have to arrest somebody, I didn't say to approach somebody walking down the street. That wasn't anything at all what I asked.
What I heard was you said both. And then the second one.
It's fine. Sometimes they don't always answer.
Okay.
It's okay. Just they have their
Okay, we don't have the option to approach people based on hearing them speak a different language. That's not within our purview. If we approach them or we are called to a crime where we arrest them, we make the case on them, they're either site released or they go are booked at jail, and that's the end of our story. We don't do anything further with them. And state officers are not trained to enforce federal law unless we're so cross-commissioned by the federal government to do that. And in my knowledge with regard to undocumented, none of the sheriff's deputies at present are.
We'll have audience questions beginning at 3.
I agree with Ms. Stewart. The local law enforcement here in Dona County does not enforce illegal immigration issues. That is something that the federal government deals with. Our job as local law enforcement is to respond to calls for service and to respond to crimes in progress. Being the fact that we live so close to the border, we oftentimes deal with someone who may be in this country illegally, but it's because they've committed a crime, not because of that fact that they've in the county illegally or the country illegally. our law enforcement officers are expected to acquire information from a person they arrest or charge, so that whenever that person is cited into court and released from jail or given a citation or issued a summons for their crime, that if they choose not to show up in court, we have to know where they are, that when a warrant is issued, they can be picked up. And that information is one of the things that officers are required to obtain. So I hope that answers your question.
A question someone wrote. We are in a current fire crisis. How do you plan to strengthen your agency's relationship with other agencies? Now, I presume that this means that out in the county, it's public safety issues and so forth connected with wildfire and so forth. So, is that an issue? So address the issue, if you would.
Yes. The issue is right now, I know that many of you may have heard or been affected by it. Because of our current rating in the county by the ISO, we are having to pay more insurance because we can't meet our current standards set by that organization. Our fire officers are not able to respond to the fires in a timely manner, or in some areas that's required by this organization in order to get a good safety rating. I believe that working in the sheriff's office is one organization within that county government, and the fire has a job, and we have many volunteer fire officers who have taken care of things over the years. As the county has grown and people are changing, they get jobs, different things occur, our volunteers have been less and less. So I think it's going to be real important to go back out into those communities and get people to volunteer, because we cannot survive in the county without volunteers. It is very important. At the same time, I think we're going to have to grow our professional fire department. And as the sheriff of Dona County, we will work with any law enforcement agency, any fire officer, company, or whatever, to get the job done for public safety. And that includes our ambulance services and other things like that also.
First of all, I have already reached out to the fire department on some common focuses, and one of them is, as was mentioned, obtaining volunteers to handle that level of service. That's a tough ask anymore, I believe, of the population, and I look at it as perhaps we should reach out and work together in certain areas such as recruitment. For example, I started my career in safety as a paid call firefighter for the California Division of Forestry. That meant that when I said I lived within a certain jurisdiction, I was available. If the bell rang, I went, and I was paid for those hours I was out. It was a great part-time job, and that was what caused me to transition into law enforcement ultimately, because of that familiarity. I see us being able to, if you will, begin a pipeline where we begin to attract people who would like to be maybe firefighters and train for a couple of years. Perhaps they would then like to go into detention work and ultimately on to work for the sheriff's department. I see this as a way to begin to get interest in safety countywide, begin to attract people who would like to move up and essentially improve their own professional standing. If nothing else, they take that with them where they will go in life. Maybe we can also become a job opportunity where people would like to stay here and work within their communities. As sheriff, I would really like to have officers, deputies working in Mesquite who are from Mesquite, deputies who are from Chaparral. But that's something that we would have to work toward, and I see that as helping the fire department down the line. That's one way we're reaching out now.
So the first portion of this question is a yes or we're requesting a firm yes or no. Do you have any ethic considerations in accepting the Stone Garden grant, and if you could please explain and elaborate on your position on local law enforcement enforcing federal immigration laws with federal agencies such as ICE and CBP.
No, I have no ethical problem with it because I'm following the direction of the Board of County Commissioners, who just voted 4-1 2 days ago or 3 days ago to accept it into the calendar year 2019. They are the people that we need to be responsive to, and I am. Now, that said, that has long been a large grant that has primarily been used to fund overtime and equipment with no real mission outside of what the grant instructions say. And believe it or not, the grant instructions speak of drug interdiction. Okay, that's the message, drug interdiction. That doesn't mean that we just do drug interdiction willy-nilly. What does that mean? The applications I've seen over the past few years, they don't really have a mission, specific direction where we could begin to focus some of those resources. I am for looking at that. At this point, I don't know enough, given the scenario, to really talk further on it. But what I am telling you, I believe there is room that we can make those funds work for the citizens of Dona Ana and not work against certain populations.
And then the second portion of that question was if you could elaborate on your position of local law enforcement enforcing federal immigration laws in cooperation with federal agencies such as ICE and CBP.
There is one sentence in the grant, one sentence that says, when called upon, if you accept this money, you will assist immigration. That's an obligation. We're accepting $750,000 this year, coming up year, along with a $400,000 piece of equipment. When they call, we have to go. I don't know exactly what that means. I intend to sit down with CBP and ask them, what is it that we've been doing and where are we going? What does this one sentence mean? But I want you to think about that carefully, because that grant demands it. Okay? It's something to be aware of. So is it my position? It doesn't matter what my position is. That's what it says in the grant, and that's what we as a community have agreed to accept for 2019.
So the first part is a yes or no question. Do you think that there are any ethic considerations in accepting the Stone Garden grant, and to explain and then to elaborate on your position on local law enforcement enforcing federal immigration laws in cooperation with federal agencies such as ICE and CBP?
No, I don't. I have no problem taking the grant. I believe that in 2005, when I was the sheriff, I got together with Sheriff Samaniego and numerous sheriffs across the border, and at that time we were working with each other and had discovered that we had numerous problems on our borders and that our problems were the same in each of our counties. And as a group of sheriffs, we determined to get together, the border sheriffs, which we did at that time. I think it was 2005 or 6, I can't remember. We met in El Paso for our first initial meeting and to make this proposal. At that time, sheriffs from Imperial County all the way down through Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas to Brownsville came together and met, and after lengthy discussion decided that we would create the Southwest Border Sheriffs Coalition. And I want to be very specific on this. These sheriffs are residents of their counties. They have family on both sides just as I do. The border is part of our lives every day, but to sit here and think that it doesn't cause problems or that there's not criminal actions occurring on the border would be foolish. That is what 100% of the sheriffs on the border got together and determined, and we decided to address this issue with the federal government, and Stone Garden was one of the things that came out of that, and it has helped us to recoup some of our losses and to help us to fund those crimes on the border.
So the second half was if you could elaborate on your position for local law enforcement enforcing federal immigration laws with federal agencies such as ICE and CBP specifically.
Like I said before, our federal agencies throughout this county, this is one reason I really like the office of sheriff. As the elected law enforcement officer of Dona County, the sheriff is the top law enforcement officer in the county. And that means that the federal government cannot come into our county and just do whatever they want to without working first with the sheriff's office, which they do very well. I think that I've already made the statement that our officers do not enforce immigration issues. However, we do respond when someone calls for help. And every law enforcement agency in this county does the same thing. I think it's very important to maintain those relationships. Border Patrol is out on their own sometimes, and when they call for assistance, we respond. Same as us. When we call for assistance, we might get help from state police, the city, Mesilla Marshals, or Border Patrol, and other agencies like that. I had a very good working relationship with all the federal agencies. We have task forces with many of them, and to do drug enforcement. I think the Stone Garden grant here in the last 6 months, the Sheriff's Department recovered in their operations out in the county 42 pounds of meth. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a lot of narcotics that were recovered and criminals arrested and put in jail for the actions that they committed. So I believe that the grant is functional, working well, and would keep it in place.
Since I lived in Dona County, what I read in the newspapers is that about the Sheriff's Department is that there's a lot of internal disagreement, a lot of disputes, some of which may be substantive, some of which may be just personal stuff, and all the same thing that goes on with the county commission. I don't like reading that kind of stuff. It seems like government isn't working very effectively when that happens. So my question is, what are you going to do to improve relations with the county commission, within the department? I'm not sure what those issues are, but how are you going to address what I read in the newspapers and don't like to read in the newspapers?
I agree. I don't even get the newspaper anymore. You know, I believe that you have to keep up in other ways. You know, it is very important as the sheriff of Dona County. I think it's important. It falls on the sheriff's shoulders to work with the county commissioners. You have to work with the other elected officials within the county. We may not always agree on personal issues and political issues, but I believe that while I was sheriff, 99% of the time we were able to discuss the issues of concern and address the needs of the people. Now, I agree there are times when things come into the different places that need to go away. That needs to be, you know, law enforcement is the concern of the sheriff's office. And as that, public safety is my concern. That involves all the public safety aspects. As the sheriff, I will deal with commissioners. I will deal with the other elected officials in the county and with other law enforcement agencies throughout the county to make sure that we have the best working relationship. One of my big goals is to really work hard in Dona County to restore the relationship between the community and law enforcement. And it's fractured across this country. And it's going to be a lot of work. And it's something I'm really looking forward to getting started in and doing. I believe that we can make a difference here in Dona County that can go across the nation. And that's my hope, that we can set the example.
One of the things I've noticed in the past decade is the sheriff's office, of course, is a paramilitary structure. So at the end of the building, it's sort of at the top, it's my way or the highway, right? Go do what I say, go respond, go jump, whatever, right? And then that head moves back to the center of the building, and it's a consensus issue, okay? And what I've seen, especially in the last few years, is where the failure of the top person, in this case the sheriff, to move easily between those two roles, okay? The BOCC, as far as I'm aware, it's a very consensus body. And they have to come to agreement in ways that Us elected officials don't, department heads don't. And one of the things I've personally noticed about working with the BOCC, I'm on the audit committee, I was voted on the audit committee last year, I'll be finishing my term in a few weeks, is that often they don't have sufficient information. So going forth, I expect to be a lot more open communication and letting commissioners know these are issues. One of them said to me recently, and I asked them about, what's your gripe with department heads and elected officials? They just come to us and ask us for money. They don't tell us why we need it, they need it. They don't tell us the past year's experiences. They just say, hey, we need it. We need this 5% increase. He says, I get so tired of that. And I see that point. I see their point. We need to be far more of a consensus body with not only BOCC, but with other directors who often we never communicate with. Other elected officials, we often will have nothing, we will not see commonality. I disagree. I told you about the sheriff, I told you about detention. There is commonality. I think we can work together. And in turn, that helps the Board of County Commissioners, I believe, going forward.
This will be the last round of questions from the organizations, then we'll have closing statements and a brief 10-minute break. We might be able to do 5 since we started a little late. And then after that, during that time, if people can start forming a line at the podium for questions to both candidates, at that time the questions need to be able to be addressed to both candidates so that neither one is targeted or asked something exclusively. Okay, so the final question from our organization is, how do you plan to maintain peace in the county? What proactive strategies do you have to improve community relations?
True community policing involves a partnership with these communities. You will agree, we have diverse needs all over the county. When we begin to give those, decentralize our power structure internally, we give deputies and line personnel a lot more say in their day and how they approach community problems. You're going to see over time an actual decrease in crime. That's what happens. The other thing that happens is there's less calls for service. They're no longer calling about that person trespassing on their property for the 15th time, because those things have begun to be addressed by the beat officer, by the deputy who serves that community, who is known. Often they will, when these programs work, if you have a problem in your neighborhood, you're calling the deputy. You are not calling dispatch. Someone pointed out to me behind Santa Teresa High School, there was fights every afternoon. Someone was stabbed 2 weeks ago. It was never reported to the sheriff because when people call, they're told, we've been out there, we're not coming back. Okay? That's unacceptable, and community policing addresses these issues. Will it be the first week, the first quarter? No. It will happen over a period of years, and we have a transition plan to bring that to fruition. So I'm telling you, the path forward is not the past, it's with a new paradigm.
How do you plan to maintain peace in the county? What proactive strategies have you considered to improve community relations?
Like I said a few minutes ago, there's over 30 different communities in our county, and every community has its specific needs and concerns. Not one problem will fix all the problems, or one solution will fix all the problems in the counties, and in each of the communities. I think it's very important to get out there, and I believe community policing is that key element that will definitely affect change in those communities. I believe having officers that live in those communities or live close to or have special interests and concerns in dealing with those communities will help them to take ownership and to get out and meet the people and to determine what those concerns are and deal with those things in a quicker and faster manner. We did that in Anthony when I was sheriff last time. Anthony was incorporating And we were in Anthony, and due to the issues and problems and concerns there, our response time was terrible. And so we moved officers into that community, and by the time Anthony finally got everything incorporated and had a year to get their law enforcement in place, we were there working with the Anthony government and making sure that anything they needed us to do and help with, we were there. I plan on taking that model out to other places, and one of the things I want to do is also hire a civilian to go out and speak with leaders in each of these communities to gather the ideas of what exactly is wrong first, and then to create plans on that. And some of the things I have done already, I do have action plans on my website, on the Facebook, that deal with specific issues and concerns that you're free to look up anytime you want to, and that is community policing, school safety, officer retention, those things.
Let's just very quickly, I want to pick up on your comment about school safety, because that's another thing I read in the newspapers, and again, that's all I know is what I read in the newspapers. So what is it that, for both of you, I mean, we see things in the paper that somehow we ought to have more armed people in schools. We ought to. What is it? What's going on with schools, and what do you need to? What's your ideas about it?
I think in this day and age, it's obvious that we have more problems in our schools and things that we need to deal with. I know that most of you heard about the kid in Boston who was recently sentenced to 20 years in prison for planning to do a school shooting, and that school happened to be in MSU here. So to think that we're out of that area of concern would be crazy. I think that it's something we have to plan for. I like having officers in the schools. The county cannot afford to do that right now. I plan to work on those issues and concerns, but I also want to say that the sheriff's office is not totally responsible for that. We have to work with the school systems, we have to work with the state, we have to work with the county, we have to work with the parents, the business communities, and different things like that to raise the resources and things necessary to make that happen. But I believe that having a law enforcement officer in those schools is important. Maybe not one that's out on the streets, but working with the state to try to get retired guys back into work at a lower rate and work it out with our retirement so they can return in that capacity. I think we could pay them less and get more out. They've already been trained and ready to respond to those kind of things. And I think having an officer in those schools, the kids look up to them when that relationship is made. They will talk to them, and we will discover more things about their lives and the problems going on, and be able to deal with them in a more professional way.
What was mentioned here is hiring a civilian community worker to go out and outreach to these different groups, okay? That is the problem of why community policing has usually failed. That's been 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people selected by a department to, you're working on community policing. You're going to be in the schools. Get on over there. That creates problems internally. There is resentment among the officers, and if you're doing it, I never want any part of it, right? That's how it works. So here's the thing. You weave it into the fabric of your agency, and that's why it is an enormous task going forward. That said, we don't need to reinvent every wheel. The ALICE initiative was just instituted by Las Cruces City. That is a great program. It helps, law enforcement comes in and gives teachers and staff different scenarios, teaches them to think about options. We train every day thinking about options, right? And then we expect teachers to, well, why didn't they do this? Well, they could have done that. Well, part of it is they're not professional law enforcement, they're teachers, right? So the ALICE initiative does give them that sort of a mindset about, well, what if? That's a very unfortunate thing we have to think about it, but it's true. The other thing, we wait far too long to become involved in schools. We all know that smoking in this country took a huge dive after we told 5-year-olds that their parents would not live to see the next Christmas if they kept smoking, right? They went home and what did they say? Stop smoking. Okay? They are living proof, many of them my age now, who will tell you, start young. Do you need to put them in every school all day long? Heavens no. They have restorative justice program right now in 16 schools. It's a pilot. We're all for it. We can be involved in that process of restorative justice, dealing with disciplinary actions within the school, from very minor to very major, by the way. I'm not an expert on that. I did do a training with them one day. I'm thrilled and I'm supportive of it. But it's going to be that kind of thing where we're looking at different options because, as you well know, there is no one answer that fits everything, and there is no one brain that can answer our problems. Together, though, we can begin to look at some of these things as having merit here.
So to begin the closing statements with Todd Garrison. So it's up to 1 minute for this one.
1 minute. First of all, I want to thank every one of you for coming out and for being able to participate here in a few minutes to ask more questions. I think this is a great opportunity to discuss these issues. Having been the sheriff in Dona County for over 10 years, I believe I have a great insight into how this community works. Having been involved in law enforcement in this community for over 30 years, Ms. Stewart just made a comment about having a civilian go out and it won't work. Well, I know for a fact that having law enforcement officers go out in those communities and try to get people to respond does not work well. People deal with law enforcement usually in negative concerns when people are responding to criminal activity, and what they see doesn't bring people to that table. So having the community respond does not work well, but hiring someone who can go out in the community and discuss these issues with those people and bring them to the table, and then together we can sit down and create a plan that the officers have input into, I think would benefit our community in a much greater way. I think law enforcement has no problems. They desire to take better care of this community. They want to, but the way we do it has to change, and I think that could be one of the ways that would work well. Thank you very much.
The law enforcement people I know and have known for 40 years are gifted, talented, smart, and dedicated people, with rare exception. But I'm going to tell you, we don't have your answers. We do not know. We do not live on your street in Barino. We do not live on your neighborhood in Hatch, okay? The way we're going to do this is to reach out routinely and commonly, and not just from the sheriff or the undersheriff or the lieutenant or the captain, but from those who deliver the service. If we give them the power to make decisions in their beat, to be responsible, to handle and resolve small problems that affect you, we're going to begin to make some real strides in policing. The reason right now deputies or police and a lot of agencies get negative feedback is because they rarely go out. They rarely stand in front of you. They rarely say, ask me any question. So when that happens, there's pent-up anger, right? There's pent-up resentment from communities. Why do you only come out once a year? Why do you come out when we need your vote? That's what happens. Someone asked us the other day, my undersheriff to be and I, will we have an open door policy? He had a brilliant answer. That's not the question. The question is, will you have an open door policy? That's it. Vote for me. You're voting for a future and not the past. Thank you.
So we will take a brief 5-minute break, and at 3:15 we'll start taking questions, and feel free to head towards the line. Thank you.